At night, Tom Cruise is not known for his acting talent, not for his death-defying stunts, but because of a sinister cult behind him. Scientology, a mind-controlling machine, a golden prison that swallows souls. Cruise is not just a pawn, he's the most successful brainwashing symbol of the century. Joe Rogan has turned every page of secret files, heard every chilling confession of escapees, and built a map of hell where Tom Cruise is the uncrowned king. Rogan will tear down the veil of piety, revealing a Tom Cruise that no one dares to mention. There's something few people know. Joe Rogan, the man at the top of the podcast world, with hundreds of famous guests and millions of listeners per episode, rarely pays too much attention to any star amidst the myriad scandals of Hollywood. Amidst the daily whirlwind of entertainment news, Rogan chooses a special position. He stands outside the game. Rogan likes different stories, intellectual battles about science, shocking conspiracy theories, and hidden truths. But then, there's a person, a strange name that clings to Rogan's mind, like a persistent ghost. Tom Cruise. Not because of talent, not because of looks, not because of the hair-raising stunts from the top of the Burj Khalifa to the helicopter rope swing between canyon cliffs. Rogan is obsessed with Cruise because of one question. What the hell does this man actually believe in? And why is that belief so strong that it submerges his career and life into something called Scientology, that bizarre cult whispered about at Hollywood's private parties, where even the most libertine stars go silent when mentioning its name? Rogan, like a predator, begins to follow the trail. Initially, it's just a fleeting curiosity, but the deeper he digs, the more he feels a chill. Cruise is not just a believer. He is the face, the standard bearer, the guiding light for all of Scientology. And Scientology, as Rogan soon realizes, is not just a belief system. It's an empire, an underground power network, an unwritten rule that controls Hollywood from behind the scenes to the red carpet. Joe Rogan admits in a podcast episode, "It's fascinating, man. This isn't just some weird cult where people chant in robes. It's a whole machine, and Cruise is the engine." The sentence is light but haunting, because for Rogan, every story about Cruise cannot be separated from Scientology. From the bizarre marriage breakdowns, the swift divorces, the children disappearing, from the public eye to the rumors about auditions to be Cruise's wife, all have the ghost of Scientology lurking behind. Then, Rogan can't stay silent anymore. For someone who prides himself on absolute freedom of thought and speech, Rogan considers ignoring Scientology as nothing short of blinding himself to the most terrifying power in Hollywood. They're not just a cult, they're an industry, a system, a expletive corporation with its own army of lawyers and spies. The sentence bursts out in the middle of a podcast, like a roar tearing through the veil of secrecy. Why does Tom Cruise, a man who can have everything, choose to dedicate his life to Scientology? Rogan can't understand that. That incomprehension makes him even more obsessed. Every time he sees Cruise smiling brightly on the red carpet, Rogan doesn't see a movie star, but a perfect puppet of an underground empire. And that's why Rogan has to speak out. Speak everything. Because in Rogan's eyes, Tom Cruise is no longer Tom Cruise. He's the living symbol of the invisible power that's strangling the movie capital. And if he doesn't speak out, Rogan knows he'll soon be drawn into that game. The game of secrets that are never allowed to be revealed. Hollywood has bright stars, but none shine like Tom Cruise. From the 80s, when those blue eyes first and swept across the big screen in Top Gun, Cruise was stamped by Hollywood as the new generation superstar, the American hero. But few people know, beneath the glamour is a journey into darkness, where Cruz becomes not just a star, but the most powerful believer in Scientology. Joe Rogan calls Scientology by the most accurate name. A cult with a Hollywood budget, Scientology is not simply a sect. It's an empire with magnificent buildings in the heart of Los Angeles, with PR teams, lawyers, and internal monitoring units as tightly organized as the CIA. And Cruz, since the 90s, has become their ultimate symbol. Every time Cruz takes the stage to receive an award, every time he appears smiling outside the Church of Scientology, millions of dollars pour into the sect's coffers. Tom Cruise doesn't just promote movies, he promotes a belief system, a path to a place where many other stars step in and quickly run away. Joe Rogan once said, he doesn't know if Cruise believes everything, or if he's trapped so deep there's no way out, and that's the crux. Tom Cruise, the invincible hero of the silver screen, is the greatest victim of Scientology, swallowed by his own halo. Scientology is not just where Cruise finds meaning, it's where he controls all of Hollywood. Once you sit at the top of the most powerful sect in the movie capital, who dares to touch Tom Cruise with Scientology behind him? Cruise doesn't need to fear anyone, but that's what's most frightening. And Joe Rogan knows that behind that smile is an abyss without light. Inside the closed rooms of Scientology, where the dim yellow light covers the soundproof walls, the name Tom Cruise is not just a symbol, he's a living saint. Rogan doesn't hide his shock when he hears direct revelations from former members who defected from Scientology, people who have witnessed and participated in Cruise's pre-programmed life. What chills Rogan is not the fanaticism of the sect, but the level of control Scientology imposes on Cruise. No corner of his life escapes the sect's surveillance, from who he loves to who he marries. When he divorces, even the most private phone calls are recorded, analyzed, and stored in secret archives. They own him. A former member sighs in a private interview that Rogan records. He's not just a believer, he's their trophy. Their proof that they can make anyone, even the biggest star in the world. Cruise's strange marriages, outwardly fairy tales with A-list stars, are actually a selection and approval process that lasts months. Scientology checks belief, loyalty, and the sexual life of each candidate. The woman chosen to be with Cruise is not just a wife, she must be a Scientology ideological ally. Rogan mentions a bizarre event recounted by a servant in Cruise's mansion, a small room called the Thought Room, where Cruise is required to confess any thoughts that deviate from Scientology's teachings. Those confessions don't take place in peace. Recorders, hidden cameras, and thick files recording Cruise's every word and expression are stored as weapons of absolute control. He's powerful outside, but inside, he's a puppet with golden strings. Rogan can't hide his shock. Cruise is not just controlled, he voluntarily becomes part of that machine. Like an addict to the sweet poison of absolute worship. The documents Rogan collects from senior former members reveal a reality Cruise no longer knows how to distinguish between real life and the script written by Scientology. Every step he takes on the red carpet, every time he smiles brightly before the camera, every speech thanking the sect backstage, are the result of years of psychological manipulation, programmed to believe that outside of Scientology, there is nothing worth existing for. They rewired his mind. A former member says, he's not acting anymore. This is his reality. Rogan understands. Cruise himself is now not just a believer, but a living propaganda tool. Scientology doesn't need advertising because every time Cruise appears, every time he mentions his beliefs, the whole world listens. The scariest thing is not that Scientology controls Cruise, but that Cruise turns himself into the embodiment of Scientology. In Hollywood, where light always hides darkness, no one dares to challenge that living saint except Joe Rogan. People often believe that Tom Cruise found Scientology himself, a man lost in the spotlight and loneliness, turning to religion as a spiritual refuge. But Joe Rogan discovers a much more shocking truth. Cruise didn't find Scientology. Scientology found Cruise. The secret documents Rogan collects from senior former members, along with leaked internal meeting recordings, reveal a perfect recruitment plan aimed at Cruise from the early days of his career. In 1985, when Top Gun was about to make Cruise an A-list star, Scientology sent people to approach him, not as missionaries, but as secret friends. They appeared around him at parties, on film sets, even infiltrating his private relationships. Each of them was trained to identify Cruise's psychological weaknesses, his obsession with control, his fear of abandonment, and his intents. They studied him like a lab rat, a former member reveals. They knew exactly what to say and show him to make him believe they held the key to everything he wanted. The first step was not evangelism, but gaining trust. Scientology gave Cruise the feeling of being worshipped like a god from the early days. Secret training courses were designed specifically for him, VIP psychological therapies only for the chosen star. Every story told to Cruise aimed at one message. He was not ordinary. He was born to lead humanity. When Cruise believed he was special, Scientology pulled the second knife. The fear of losing control. Stories about underground forces, enemies trying to sabotage his success, were pumped into Cruise's mind daily, and only Scientology had the tools to help him fight them. They built his paranoia, then sold him the cure. Joe Rogan bitterly admits that step by step, Tom Cruise was not persuaded. He was programmed. When the world saw him standing, smiling brightly on stage, waving powerfully, inside, he had lost everything except blind faith in Scientology. Joe Rogan once called Scientology a golden cage, and if that cage was only big enough to hold one person, the only name engraved on the front door was Tom Cruise. Outside, it was the halo of a great action star, a hero on the silver screen with cable-free jumps and million-dollar smiles. But inside, when the door closed, Cruise was a prisoner in the empire built specifically for him by Scientology. Joe Rogan didn't believe the rumors until he sat face-to-face with former members who had served in the sect's senior ranks. These people not only witnessed, but also participated directly in the process of shaping Cruise's life. They told of the luxurious privileges Cruise enjoyed, private villas in Clearwater, Florida, where Scientology's headquarters were located, private jets carrying him to VIP training courses, private parties where Cruise was worshipped like a god. They call it the royal treatment, a former member says, but a gilded cage is still a cage. The price of that worship was freedom of thought. Everything Cruise heard, saw, and accessed had to go through the Scientology filter. Movie scripts sent to him were energy analyzed to ensure no content opposed the teachings. New friends Cruise wanted to make had to go through a spiritual background check before being allowed into his life. Even relationships, small flutters of emotion had to be approved. There is no private moment. Every thought, every conversation, every touch, it's all documented. A former member sighs. He's never alone, even when he thinks he is. Joe Rogan is particularly obsessed with the mind control tool that Scientology applies specifically to Cruise, the knowledge reports. Anyone who works, contacts, or serves Cruise is required to write daily reports, detailing every expression, every word, every unusual behavior. These reports are stored in control files, thick enough to fill a small library. For Scientology, Cruise is not just a star. He is a living experiment, proof that anyone, even the most powerful, can be completely controlled if they know how to touch the right weaknesses. He trusts them more than himself, someone says. That's why he's still there. What haunts Joe Rogan most is the implicit consent from Cruise himself. No chains bind him because Cruise has locked the door from the inside. The luxurious privileges, the praises, the feeling of being placed at the top of a global sect, all turned into an addictive drug. Cruise doesn't leave because of fear, but because he no longer believes the world outside Scientology has anything worth returning to. He doesn't think he's a prisoner. He thinks he's the king, and that's the biggest tragedy, when the golden cage becomes the whole world and Tom Cruise becomes the gatekeeper of his own prison. Joe Rogan once said in a podcast episode, "No one marries Tom Cruise. They marry Scientology." That statement is not a joke. It's the stark truth gleaned after a series of interviews with people who served and witnessed Cruise's 3 broken marriages from start to finish. Nicole Kidman, Katie Holmes, golden names of Hollywood, stepped into Cruise's life as Scientology vetted candidates, and then stepped out with invisible scars that never healed. Joe Rogan spent months researching Cruise's partner selection process, a process so bizarre that no one believed it was real. Every time Cruise